everybody, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Gameable audio of VGM podcast surrounding video game music. And this week, episode 25 is going to be a little bit of a special one, as we have... Let's see if we have the numbers correctly here. Yes, we have David Giuseppe Ventura and also Pete Fraser. So David is the VD of the company Ichigoichie, and Pete is the composer. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
Thank you.
It is really good to have you here to discuss a little bit more about the game Backbeat, which we are going to cover for this episode. But as usual, we're going to talk a little bit more generic about who you are before we dive into this episode specifically. So, I am your host, Kristoffer Schenström, and let's actually start here a little bit from the beginning. We're going to start here with David here, as we're going to talk a little bit more about Ichigoichie here. So, Ichigoichie, stylized as 151A. First of all, can we get a little description on the company name here?
Yes, in Japanese, it's a saying that means one chance in a lifetime. And we recognize it as a logotype with 151A, but it basically works around our philosophy, which is we want to build a new experience every day and have it impact someone's life for the better. So we want to treat every one of our customers, every one of our gameplay decisions, every one of our songs that we write, as if it's the only chance we're going to get with it, and we want to create a lasting impression that makes everyone's life better, and that's part of our philosophy at the company.
It's really fun to see also, you're still quite of a new company. As I understood, you've been created as a company in 2018, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Just celebrated our 5th anniversary.
That's awesome. Well, sounds like a perfect idea to talk a little bit more about Backbeat as well, which is also your second game. The first one being Hexagon Grooves.
Hexgroove, yes.
Hexgroove, sorry. But considering once in a lifetime and focusing on uniqueness and lifetime experiences, it's really interesting that you chose to go with musical and rhythm games as your kind of... Well, it looks like a niche at the moment since you have 2 games.
Right.
Is there a specific reason why you chose specifically for music games to begin with?
Yeah, it kind of goes into the DNA of the developers, of the founders of the company. I have actually been developing games for about 20 years now, and I cut my teeth developing games at an indie studio in Japan called Ennis. And we made rhythm games and music, karaoke, things like that. I had an interest in music for a long time, but that company really fostered my love of learning about music and wanting to produce music. And that had a great time with that. So when I moved to Sweden, I started working at Propellerhead, which is a music software company here. And that's where I met my co-founder, Magnus, who also has had a deep love for both performing music as well as helping others be creative. And that's something we wanted to build into the company. So all of our titles are centered around that love of expressing oneself musically and helping other people do the same.
Yeah. And it's so interesting as well that you also have a company in Japan. Specifically, as everybody knows, we have DDR and so on. We have so many musical games from Japan as well. So it just getting those 2 worlds kind of together, the love for music, but also Japan, seems very unique by itself since the company is based in Sweden, first of all.
Yes, yes.
So with that said, we have a little bit more about the company. Then we would like to get Pete into the action here. Considering musical career, where did you kind of start getting interest in music, first of all? Where did you learn to play music?
Well, that's a good question. Both my parents were professional musicians, so I grew up with music in the house and lots of instruments available. And didn't really... I played music from the age of 7, started playing the clarinet. And yeah, I suppose then began taking things more seriously as a teenager and playing with my friends and being in bands and all that kind of thing. And yeah, as a teenager I was in a punk band and toured around Europe and the UK. I grew up in London. And everything kind of branches away from that I've done since, really. So everything, it feels like some kind of offshoot from those experiences that I had as a teenager playing with bands.
Yeah. It's really nice to have that kind of section starting already from a very early age. But it's interesting that you kind of moved into the punk. I know punk type of music really grew wild in the UK. I mean, we have a lot of different bands from that. It feels almost like the culture started there, to be honest. I actually don't know that much about it.
Right. I'm a little younger than those guys. Yeah. I'm
not for long.
No, I know. I mean, tell me about it. I'm turning 40 years old tomorrow. I'm let's say I'm at the point of listening, I'm 40 years old. So I guess it was the early 2000s was the time when I was coming up, when there was a big influence from American punk, I guess, on everybody. But I'm my profession from the performance point of view is as a saxophone player. So I was always a slight fish out of water in that scene as well. I was playing in a horn section in a band as a teenager. So because I didn't play the guitar or the drums or the bass, I always had to be a little creative about what my place would be within any of these environments, but it also meant that I was a little unusual and that I could find my way into lots of interesting situations with interesting people, which is something that I feel has continued ever since. There hasn't really been a year where I haven't found myself, including writing the music for a game, in a position that's been as much of a kind of surprise to me as it has a new opportunity. Yeah. Okay.
Listening to a lot of composers that I've been interviewing, but also reading on interviews and so on, a lot of the composers usually tend to have an interest in video games. Is that the same for you?
No, absolutely not, actually. In this situation, I came to it having kind of written a few soundtrack pieces before, mainly to picture for film. And I had some mutual friends with David through Propellerhead, where I didn't work, but I have lots of friends who did, who said, hey, this guy is working on this thing and he's looking for a saxophone player, which is how I first heard about it. And I thought it'd be interesting maybe to really put together a pitch for the whole soundtrack, rather than just come in and play the saxophone on it. Try and pitch a concept that might be able to work for the entire thing. So we began talking in those terms when David and I first met.
Okay. So David, in consideration to this, you were looking specifically for a saxophone player, ending up with Pete, of course. But in what section of the game were you at when you started looking for specifically a saxophone player? Was there a specific reason for that, or was that just a natural course through development?
It's funny that you bring that up, because that's not even how I remember it. Like, I just kind of, as long as I've
it
wanted
might
to
not have been what you said either, but it was what was said to me.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, well, I could not, but like, it just seems like Pete was there from the beginning, and like, it was a natural course of events, is the way that it feels. But I think what I did was I was looking for a funk musician. I asked my friends, do you know anyone in Stockholm that knows funk?
Yeah.
And then I think multiple people that were Pete to mine's common acquaintances were like, oh, it's definitely this guy. and I was like, really? Okay. And then I met Pete and I was like, shit, this guy really knows his stuff. Like, and they were spot on. I mean, it was really, it just kind of hit the vibe of what we wanted to go for from the first day, I think.
How early in development was Pete integrated into the process as well? Because I'm guessing with a music game or rhythm game, it feels like music is such a big important part that you should implement a composer like almost as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's actually a big I've worked on lots of music games in the past, but Backbeat is my second one where I've been the director, and that
Yep.
side of the equation, I'm just kind of like working from my gut, as well as I guess things that probably I heard when I worked on other stuff. But it seems natural to me that, I mean, what we want to do is make games where people can express themselves musically. So we want to give
Yep.
the player like a bucket of musical Legos to put together and build their own songs. And so the music is not just give me a soundtrack that will be playing, and it's not even give me a dynamic soundtrack where I can like fade between intense strings and like softer strings and things like that. It's really the nuts and bolts of how the gameplay works, and we tie it into the game design. So if we don't have a song or the components of a song that can be broken apart and then like incentivized from a game design perspective, as well as creating wonderful music, then we have nothing. So when I design a game, usually I talk with my co-founder Magnus, and I say, what should we do? How do we approach this? And he's like, well, what kind of music do you want the player to be able to create? And that's very important to me. So that's where we get Pete in the equation. Say, okay, Pete, I want to have this kind of thing, and we have this idea about how the progressions are going to be, or how the alternates and variations. Is this possible in fun?
Yeah.
You know? And we had I think one or two other artists that we had very early on when we were like doing prototyping, and then we had some things we were trying there, but it was definitely before production. It was still in pre-production because we were deciding the phase of how the data needs to be done from a workflow perspective. So that's one thing you have to check off in pre-production is what is going to be the tool set and the workflow for every kind of data we're going to produce in production. So
Yeah, exactly.
he was with the project for a very long time.
I remember the first meeting we had. The appearance of the game was still a kind of flat overhead puzzle.
Yeah, it was when we were doing the emoji.
Formed of
the web browser
emojis.
version. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it was a concept, really. I mean, it was
really
a
nice when you
bold
can see
concept.
things so early in stages as well, considering from where you basically go with the game. With Backbeat, we have this isometric kind of style right now.
Right.
And knowing that, hey, it actually started as a 2D top-down kind of shtick, getting a good understanding of the space and how mechanics might have worked in this. It's a good kind of understanding, and also a really good pre-production kind of phase within game development, just for understanding.
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
I think at that stage as well, we spent some time. I mean, we probably did use in the finished game. We probably did use some of the material that we used early on, but for quite some time, there was an aspect of kind of making music in the format that we had decided it had to be made in, and then implementing it and seeing whether it could work. So, you know, trying to not even necessarily implementing it into a level per se, but just trying to decide how that the whole concept is built up around a series of clips. So with each player, they can make a particular move, and with each move they make, a musical clip will play, and trying to make that sound as unbroken and natural as possible with the playback at the end of the level was the big challenge. And I think in order to arrive at that, we had to kind of stop talking and start doing at a certain stage, and some of the early stages didn't sound totally natural. But all the way through, we encountered things, and we learned more about what the process would have to entail in order for not only for the gameplay to work, but for it to feel musical, which was an important thing for all of us, I think.
Yeah. David, from a perspective of producing and producer, was it a clear state from the beginning that you wanted to go with a funk take within the game itself as a musical genre?
Yeah, we were thinking about first of all what kind of music style lends itself to working with the kind of concepts that we're talking about. In our first game, Hexagroove, we did EDM, and that was a very easy transition because the player is tasked with creating a dance floor hit on the fly while people are dancing in a club. So if you can imagine you're working with like a Ableton Live or a Launchpad or something, and you're just like stitching together drum beats and synthesizers on top, and every 4 bars you can change something to affect the energy level. That worked really, really smoothly. And then we said, well, for the second title, we want to challenge ourselves and we want to create something that has characters in it this time, and what could these characters be? And we want to do analog music because we did digital for the last one. And then, what kind of analog music can work with this piecemeal procedural, stitch it together and grade you on what kind of song you're creating, kind of design goal that we had. And then, funk is like, okay, you don't have to have vocals. That makes it easier. It's very danceable. There's a lot of improvisation that can happen. So that was one of the some of the guiding pillars that led us to choose that genre for the game.
Okay, nice. So, in order to get a little bit more generic understanding of the game we've been talking and touching a little bit about, the game Backbeat, it released on the 15th of March this year, 2023. It is a fun combination of both puzzle and music for me, and together with the strategy of how to set up the best patterns. In the Backbeat demo, you basically control 4 different band members: Watts on bass, Toshi on keyboard, Josh on drums, and lastly Shaz on saxophone. All these characters have their own way of moving. For a really easy understanding from my perspective, I would say they could be controlled similar to chess pieces. Well, if they only could move in straight lines, that is. And you'll also move throughout a story that will take you basically from the start of the band and, shoot for the stars, creating magical funk music over time. If I remember correctly, it was like 6 or 7 levels maybe in the demo. David, you might help me on this one.
Yeah, I think it's like 7 levels. Yeah, that feels right.
And for me, I felt like it gave a good understanding of the game. I just felt like it was so sad that I couldn't play Shaz that much, though. You only have him for 1 level. But it was a good kind of fun niche of what the demo gave. I think it gives a good understanding of what I could expect from the full game, even though I couldn't play Shaz that much.
Right.
Oh, you get your chance later on. You'll regret what you wish for slightly. Maybe.
Especially when you unlock the super moves.
Oh my god.
Was there any specific, just to have that asked, was there any specific reason why you didn't add the super moves into the demo?
Yeah, that's always a tough decision, I think, as game developers, when you're asking what slice of the game do you put into your free version versus the version you ask people to pay for. And in our first game, Hexagroove, we introduced a lot of mechanics very early on into the game. And because our games are very unorthodox, it kind of overwhelmed a lot of people. And they're like, whoa, what does this mean? I'm like, I don't understand. So we said, okay, in Backbeat, we want to spread these out so we don't overload the person mentally. So we actually did this kind of partitioning of introducing new mechanics slowly throughout the game. And you get super moves, I think, at what ends up being about maybe 50 or 60% the way through. To put them in sooner would confuse, I think, be kind of overwhelming difficulty-wise. That's why they're later in the game.
Yeah, okay. Awesome. I think it's time for us to listen to the first track of the week. And usually, when it comes to selecting music, usually the guests select some tracks and I select some other tracks. But in this week, since we have a very specific, as I said, we've been touching this subject a little bit, since there are a bit specific when it comes to these tracks, I've been the one selecting the tracks for this week. And if I remember correctly, understanding from the picks that I've done, these are also a little bit chronologically in order to how we can encounter them inside the game.
Yes.
And first of all, the first track of the week that we're going to listen to is the Power Slides theme, composed, of course, by Pete here, that is in the episode. And this is basically the main music of the game. there we fade out the first track of the week, the Power Slides theme. And as I usually do for these episodes when we have a guest, I usually go through my kind of feeling when I was listening to these tracks. And basically, that is me just closing my eyes, listening to the track by itself over and over again to see, okay, what kind of feeling is invoked inside of me to get a better understanding of the track itself. And of course, like I told David and Pete and everybody in the podcast knows, I am no expert whatsoever, but I usually tend to get a good grasp of these. Maybe it's just luck, I don't know. So, for Power Slide's theme, I think it has a nice vibe, first of all. This gives me one of those laid-back funk jazz kind of vibe. And I especially love the saxophone in this, being the main stage instrument, because it kind of overtakes so much in the track itself. Well, at least it did what it does in the track. It pops out, and it pops out really well in this track. So that was my kind of vibe for this. So, Pete, what did you think about that kind of vibe?
Yeah, I mean, the saxophone being front and center is a useful one for me because I can record it myself. So I don't need anybody to come over and... Because in this game, there are a whole host of other session musicians who came in and played different parts for different characters. But the saxophone, I could just pick up myself and play it. So the reason, you might hear quite a bit of saxophone isn't just purely because there's a character in the game playing the saxophone, but because that's me too. So
it's your shtick.
Yeah, pretty much. So this came from, I can't remember if this grew out of a reference that David gave to me. I think it probably did, but it's pretty clearly a kind of Tower of Power influenced funk type of thing. And if I remember right, this was always intended to be the menu music, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we wanted. I think I asked for what is the main theme, and this is the first full piece that you brought in, and you knocked it out of the park, Pete. It's fantastic.
Thank you. I was trying to get a picture in my head of what the band could eventually sound like, because the story of the game is that they are not inverted commas good band to begin with. They're thrown together by circumstance, and they find each other because they're the only people they can find in a way, and they're thrown together into this situation because they want to be in a band, as so many bands begin in that way of you decide you want to be in a band first and then you decide how later on. So this, in my mind, was where they could get to, because obviously menu music in a game, the establishing thing, the first thing that everybody's going to hear when they boot the game up, you want to have some impact and a bit of a sheen and something kind of exciting, but something that also links in as firmly to the story and the characters and the environment of the game as much as possible. So I was trying to balance those two elements of having something very impactful and, bright and felt kind of gamey but felt really funky as well, but that also plausibly was music created by the characters in the game. Yeah.
Okay. Usually when it comes to soundtracks and so on, you kind of you need to start somewhere in order to either have a red thread throughout. It's okay, this is the vibe I'm going for. But at the same time, we're looking here at a game, as you said. They're starting kind of from circumstance. They're not necessarily a good band. How was the red thread going through this development? I think, David, you can have some inputs on this as well from a produce perspective. What did you think about the development of the music for this game as well? As of course, these musicians are getting progressively better over time, I guess.
Yeah, I think what we wanted to accomplish, and now that I have the document up here, I'm looking at it, remembering. That we wanted to have an evolution of the music in the game from the beginning to the end, because like Pete said, when they get together, they're amateurs and they have never played together, and they start out with something of more bare bones and not as polished, but they end up with this really great place that they're at the end. So we kind of had this like, I had this like arrow drawn in this document we were looking at. Like, this is the evolution of music, punctuated by the act changes. Like in Act 1, they're going to sound like this. Then Act 2 breaks, and they've like leveled up, and now it's going to be like this. And we also kind of followed the evolution of funk, so to speak, like starting back with like James Brown and like the beginning of like its soul origins, and then ending up with this fusion-y kind of like late 70s thing. So like Pete said, the beginning is, it has to sound great, but it shouldn't sound like they're super talented yet. You know, it's like telling a really talented artist like Pete, can you play it a bit sloppier? Like, can you do it like not quite so good? Like the challenge that he has to have with that. But I think with the menu music, it was like, because the music of this game is so unique, he had to build everything based on improvisations, based on certain intervals, with incredibly demanding data specification. This has to be chopped up and able to be reassembled on the fly by the player. But these musics where I say, okay, Pete, you don't have to worry about any of these rules anymore, just go nuts. I think that was the stuff that he probably could be like, finally, I'm done my homework. Now I get to like shine, you know, like after doing all these scales essentially, and it really shows
like a holiday.
You can hear him having so much fun with it. I just love, was it the bridge with the sax solo, like 3/4 of the way through this song. It's amazing.
But Pete, from a perspective of the composer's side, how does it feel to actually need to play worse to some extent? Is it fun to do that as a challenge, or from your perspective, how did you feel about this?
I think it was because Magnus and David were quite strict about what kind of level the band should be at on various different levels. I mean, obviously the characters are introduced one by one as well, so you are restricted in terms of the instruments involved, beginning with just the bass. So obviously,
just what's in the
first
beginning.
Exactly. So the first level is kind of really a bass solo. But you know, I tried to think of it in terms of basic rather than incompetent in terms of the characters, because we acutely aware that we wanted all the levels to sound satisfying when the player completed them. We didn't want them to feel like they'd worked hard on completing a level and then got to the end of it and had some bad music to show for it. So basic as opposed to bad, I think was a big focus in terms of on my part at least, for the development of the characters and their abilities. So obviously we had to really hold back in the beginning, but also wanted it to sound like a nice and satisfying piece of music at every stage. So maybe there was a little poetic license in terms of, she could really play the bass and it sounded nice at the beginning, but she was playing in an extremely simple way, as opposed to making a ton of mistakes.
From my experience, when I listen to people in bands and so on, bass is, for example, a player that is really important to have, but at the same time, they usually like this person that kind of stands on the side, and everybody else usually tends to take like the spotlight.
Sure.
How come, from a perspective that you chose to implement these instruments throughout the game in this specific order, starting with the bass, going in with the keyboard, and then the drums, for example? Maybe David has a better insight on this.
There's a story aspect there as well that David can go into.
Yeah, it's like we try to build parallels between the game design principles as well as the music. So like Pete said, and like you come on as well, like the bass is like the anchor. And the bassist usually has the thankless work of holding things together, making stuff work, and you don't notice them up front, but they are the people that hold it together. So we started with the bassist, and then we thought, well, we want to have some melody to complement the rhythm that she could bring initially. So that's why Toshi, the keyboardist, comes in second. And then gameplay-wise, they're very similar in terms that they both move 2 tiles at a time. But, using that chess analogy you brought up earlier, they do stand on different columns. So they're kind of like bishops in the sense where you have to use them similar, but like working through different regions. And then the drummer is there to further give them, you got to have some kind of drums, right? In the piece to hold it and keep the time and anchor it. And he's a compassionate kind of character that's kind of like usually defending and protecting Toshi and to a more extent than Watts. And then finally in the story, like they're like, yo, we got this 3-piece band, but it's like they're not getting the fans. They don't quite have something that sets them apart. And then they consult with their sage, with their mentor, and he's like, you need some flair. And of course, loud, obnoxious saxophone added to this like mix they have is going to like push them up the top to help them compete with their rival bands. And that's the way that it works in the story. So that's why the saxophonist is there. And yeah, without giving away too much about the story, he creates an important force in the band. Then with the push and pull of the egos and the musical roles and things like that.
Well, it sounds very interesting. I mean, for me, who played also the demo here, I'm quite intrigued in what more we can expect out of this game. It really did grasp me, and as we've said as well, with the analogy of these chess characters, as well as you said with Watts and Toshi, the keyboard player and the bass, they're basically on different columns. With the drums, he has a little bit special because he's moving way further, but also he has the special ability of stopping and basically can walk into walls and people and so on. So he's a little bit limited. He basically moves up to that specific range. And
it's a
then
difficult
with the
character to play.
Yeah, exactly. But also fun for me, who loves these type of puzzles. For me, it's more of a puzzle game than a music game. But for some other, it might be a great musical game. So I really like the dynamic from a game perspective there. Really enjoyed it on that part. And then the last character, the saxophone played by Chaz, he only moves one section, so 1 1 1 1 1. So also he can be a bit frustrating to move around depending on what you do with him. But anyway, the huge mechanic that is kind of covered by all this. I think, David, you are way better explaining this and what the kind of dynamic and why it becomes such a puzzler. Why is this so interesting? So please give a little bit of a description here of the gameplay.
Right. So in all of our games, we have this like design mantra that we do where we want to grade you on how you quote unquote follow the rules of music. That is to say, there are of course no real rules in music, but we create this set of like axioms that help guide you along towards creating something within this basic framework. But we give you the freedom to then improvise or to choose, do I have a sax solo here, or is it a keyboard solo, or those kind of things. But each of the interactions that you do and how the music changes over time is directly tied to the timing of when you turn a character in the map or when you open a door to let someone else through in the map. Because when you do these things, the music is changing. We're swapping to a different improvisation that Pete has composed, or we're launching a 4-bar solo that lets one character shine. And obviously, if I'm listening to a fabulous Pete sax solo, I don't want to have a keyboard solo at the same time. We don't want them stepping on each other. So that is something that we penalize. It might be possible to an extent, but that's part of the resource management the player has to do. So this physical and space management and this times domain space management of when to have different players work together in different ways is all about what makes a great band and how you support each other. And I think that's also, it's important in all band music, but especially I think in something like funk or jazz, where we're doing improvisation and comping each other.
I really like that kind of gameplay of it, because all of a sudden you have this kind of huge dynamic between all the different characters that you're able to play with, and going back and forth between the timelines, etc. It's fun to play with. It's fun to just see like what's the outcome of this. But in the end, when you press play, when you got all the characters into the zone that you need to go to, which is the goal of this game, always get to the zone that is lit up on the map. Then you get the magic, and this is where, well, the game shines the most, in my opinion. It is so much fun to just see the fruits of your labor, basically.
Yeah.
And that was, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Pete.
That was an awful lot of what we spoke about in the initial meetings. was this concept that the reward is the song, and that you theoretically, I mean, obviously there's, in the practical playing of the game, there's only a certain number of solutions because the puzzles get quite complicated as things go on. But essentially, in terms of the depth of the number of moves, each of which is represented by a unique sample, nothing gets reused, it's all just recorded material. The number of possibilities with the song that you might end up with are functionally infinite. Because there will always be some subtle difference. It will always follow the same form, you know, it will always be the same song, but it will be a different version of the same song. In theory, of each time you make a different decision, which kind of is a little like, or is intended to reflect a little what it's like to play in a band like this, where you don't know what other people are going to do and you are going to have to react to it. And so there's almost a kind of semi-generative aspect to the music. That was the way I was looking at it from the beginning, that this will be something where it's uncertain what the music will sound like from the outset. So it's not, you know, in that sense, it's not a soundtrack whatsoever. It's far more mechanical than that, and it's far more unpredictable than that. And we tried to, whilst making the gameplay playable and making the music musical, make the kind of compositional concepts as deep as we possibly could, so that, you know, in theory, things never felt exactly the same. If you had played the game in a slightly different way, if you played the level in a slightly different way, you will end up with something reflected in the decisions you chose to make throughout that level, which was obviously a challenge, but, you know, something that we worked on very hard. Yeah.
Awesome. I think it's time for the second track of the week, and the next track I've lined up here is the Backwards J.
That's right.
There we have it, Backwards J. And my feeling for this track gives off of a slight jungle-styled secret agent type of track. Well, the song got style. What did you think about that, Pete?
I'm trying to remember.
Jungle-style secret agent track.
Oh, for sure, by all means. Yeah. I can't remember what... David, can you remember what the reference you gave me for this was?
Yeah, it's 10-ton take by the Big Heavies.
Right. And what's going on in the game at this stage is, you need to remind me about that as well, because it's just bass and saxophone that you're playing, right?
Yeah, so
it sounds very early.
This is the one where the saxophone power move is introduced with the walking bass, the bass power move.
That's why there's walking bass in it.
Exactly. They're at the pawn shop, and then the sax character Chaz, sees his Excalibur of saxes, and he's about to buy it, but then someone else tries to get in the way of that, so they need to make a dash to grab it in time. But before that, there's always like the recurring gig of the push and pull of the band members sometimes making fun of each other, either intentionally or unintentionally. I think that Josh comments that the saxophone looks like a backwards J or something like that.
I see. I know when we were listening to this or preparing to listen to this, we talked a little bit about like work name or project names when we're listening to or working on music. Pete, from what I understood, you guys worked with a lot of different names, so the names that went into the album in the end are not the same.
No, they came late for me.
How does it work for you when you're working on a track? Do you have a specific standard that you usually name them, or?
It's named after the level to which it applies and the version of that level that we have reached. So how many times I've had to begin again because it doesn't work, basically. So this was level I version. Probably this one probably didn't take. Well, I don't actually anything that involved the saxophone. We had to go back to the drawing board quite a few times because the mechanics of the saxophone character, taking very small steps as he does in the level, were just really, really, really hard to write music for. Because to sort of go technical, the length of the clips that I had to export from my project, for the drums, they could be like 4 bars long. And for the bass and so on, they generally were something around a bar long. And for the saxophone, they were maybe 2 beats. And so doing 3 alternatives mid-phrase for 2 beats to something that is going to end up being a piece of music that's a couple of minutes long and sounding coherent, it was a real challenge. And there were points where we had to develop some strategies together, essentially, to make sure that what came out just didn't sound completely incoherent. Yeah, because apart from anything, I mean, there was all kinds of challenges. So other phrases going to flow along, and then the kind of realization that we had that a saxophone player doesn't just play a constant long stream of a phrase for 2 minutes. Yeah. That's not how music works.
It doesn't.
So
it's like speed metal of saxophonists.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there was a danger that things sound, even if everything worked on a technical level and everything worked on a phraseological level, where it would sound coherent if the guy just didn't take any pauses or anything like that. It just didn't sound like music anymore. So it was just one of a number of examples of things that we butted up against, and we had to just sit down and discuss possible solutions to them. Yeah. Okay, what do we do here? How is this going to work with the game? How is it going to work from my end as a composer? And what will be the technical solution to how we overcome this problem? And that was something that we came up against just with absolutely everything, because we were working on something and kind of making up, inventing solutions for things that I don't really feel like there were too many precedents for all along. Yeah.
When it comes from a technical perspective with the music, Pete, was the saxophone the hardest technical thing to compose for, or did you have any other struggles with any other instrument there?
They were, so the way we did it was I played all the saxophones, all the stuff for the excepting any cutscenes or menu music or anything like that. In terms of the gameplay stuff, I played all saxophones. A bass player called Martin Höfberg, who's one of the great Swedish jazz bass players, played all the bass. The drums, we initially kind of briefed out the idea of how we might do it with a real drummer, and gave up on that idea quite quickly. Of the idea of recording short clips of drums, and the idea that the cymbals hang over would have presented a lot of problems and stuff. So we did the drums out of the box using MIDI libraries. Okay. And the keyboards were played by David Nyström, another great Swedish pianist who came in. But we used, again, MIDI libraries for the various keyboards, just to save on just the sheer enormous workload of playing everything on loads of different vintage instruments in an expensive studio. So basically everything was a real person except for the drums.
Yeah.
Which I programmed all of. Yeah. From that perspective. And yeah, so accuracy was a huge challenge. I didn't want to go through and quantize everything because then it just would have sounded like kind of generative AI music or something. So I really wanted somebody to be playing. I didn't even really quantize the drums. I kind of played them in myself. I wanted everything to feel like people were playing things, and I wanted it to be reflected in the finished product. But because we were slicing everything up into small things that would then represent the steps of every character, it was also extremely important that everything was played massively accurately, and there was a large amount of editing to do at the before the export stage to kind of make sure that everything exported so that nothing was ever cut in the middle of a note, basically. Yeah, so that was one of the huge technical challenges, that we wanted things to feel natural, but also there was a level of sort of requirement of accuracy that was far, far higher than you would ever encounter in a situation where you were recording a piece of music or a traditional soundtrack or anything like that. Even in film, where the cues all have to end on the button, then you're talking like 30 seconds. You're not talking 1.5 seconds in a single part, So, yeah, the accuracy requirements were something that took a lot of getting used to, and frankly were exhausting to work on because we weren't a large studio with lots of people in the music department, so there was a lot of going through things, and I don't know how familiar you or your listeners are with music software, but
I'm aware of they exist, and I'm aware of some of them with MIDI samples, etc.
Okay, so we used just from the library's perspective, just as a piece of nerdy trivia, we used the Native Instruments Abbey Road drums for the drum kits, which were perfect for this, and we used various Native Instruments keyboards for the keys. But then to go through with the editing, I was working in audio with all the basses and the saxophones, so I couldn't edit in MIDI, and I had to find a way to tackle that. So there's a piece of editing software called Melodyne. And most people use Melodyne for tuning, but we used it for timing, and I leaned on it very heavily, and it was a really useful thing to keep things sounding natural but make sure nothing hung over the edge of any clips, so that we didn't end up with any strange phantom sounds anywhere, which was a significant danger. And I mean, we're really talking like tens of thousands of individual exports here. So it was really, really important that all of them were as accurate as possible. So it involved a lot of checking before the export stage. Yeah.
I see. David, from a technical perspective, when working with the puzzling part of the game, considering also with the audio and all the instruments going in, how was it when you worked with Pete as a composer for the music and setting up this style for a certain level?
Right.
Like, was it easy, or did you bounce back and forth? It's such a uniqueness that we have both somebody at the company to talk about this and also the composer, so we can understand a little bit more from the perspective of going back and forth between the music from implementing into the game and the composition part.
Yeah, like like Pete said, our process kind of evolved over time. And we started out like even before Pete was involved, when we did the very first versions of the game with the emojis and stuff. We tried doing generative music in the sense that like different note progressions and stuff were played, and everything was done through MIDI as opposed to recorded audio, based on what was happening, so that you could really produce there was not like a constant song or a template and things like that. It was kind of free form. And that became untenable for various reasons in terms of like both the music produced and then how that mapped different things. So then we went to the phase where Pete came into it and we started doing like these clips with these variations and then slicing up all the audio and having him cut it up for us.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like Pete mentioned, I think at the end of the day, when you count up a number of clips, I don't remember the top of my head, but it really is, above 10,000 pieces of audio that are in Backbeat that are different songs that we patch together in real time based on how the player is playing. That we got to a point where I think like 50 or 60% through, we're like, okay, this is just incredibly time intensive for him to do this work. And then we tried this kind of thing where it might not sound X% as good, but if we can like cut it up with some kind of tooling automatically, then he doesn't have to slice the audio himself. And then we'll do add a little reverb tail on top of the stuff ourselves procedurally and blah 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 blah, and trying to automate that. And I think it got a little bit better then. When Pete didn't have to chop up.
I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
Work-wise, it was a lot easier. I was kind of losing my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it was still probably really...
well, because there was a whole metric kind of mathematical aspect to exporting the clips by hand as well.
Yeah, I remember every time when I visited your house and you had that paper
pulses
taped to the side of your monitor that says like how many PPQs is like...
I'm looking at it right now. I've got it's still up by my ear.
You've got like 3 different like numerical formats going out to like PPQs, like a 5-digit number like going out and it's taped to the side of your screen.
Chris, I'll send you a picture of this mathematical crazy sheet that I have.
Because I think Pete was actually underselling it earlier. I'm looking at the spreadsheet now where we have the formulas, and it's, you know, the saxophone player in particular, his steps are between 1 and 1.5 beats. So Pete was slicing the audio in 1 to 1.5 beat intervals, which can be 0.48 seconds, 480 milliseconds of time at 126 BPM. And then he had to do that, and then the mastering guy had to do that too. So like he was going through tens of thousands of small audio clips, and then like we added, like I said, these tool chain improvements to try to make it a bit easier, so there was less human labor involved. And I think with the sax in particular, like you said, you know, we wanted to have the player the freedom to go between any one of 4 improvisations at any point in time if they change direction. But then we just said, you know, this is ridiculous. Like, it's no saxophonist is going to play like one beat and then like be able to jump to any other note for another beat, and then like you couldn't hold any notes, like he says, more than a beat long, which makes no sense. Like, not everything.
The lack of anything longer than like a fraction of a second was a problem.
Not everything is staccato. So we ended up making a compromise so that, like, okay, we guarantee you that no matter what the player does, we will give you at least, 2 or 3 beat sections in succession so that they're strung together and you don't have to worry about cutting it that close. And I think that it's a well-worth compromise, because the music is much better. He doesn't have to stress about it quite as much. And I think the reduction in player freedom is not noticeable by probably 95% of the people that are making the music with it anyways.
You would have to really be like holding down the button on every step in a way that no one in the world would play that game in order to pick up on that, I think. Yeah.
Theoretically, we should continue to the next song, but I kind of have one more kind of theoretical question, though, considering the saxophonist. Well, he's only moving one step. And one thing that was interesting in the game is that everybody is moving in straight lines. Considering usually how you see jazz players play music, they usually swing from side to side. Was there never any other like thoughts about like, hey, maybe you should move diagonally only, for example?
I think if you allow diagonal movement, it doesn't really work with the physics system that we have, because what we're doing is we're checking for collisions in time. And and the collisions have to happen on a grid square basis. We check, does it collide or does it not? And if you drew a vector between 2 points diagonally without going through grids by making a right angle turn, then we can't
messed up.
Yeah, we can't run that kind of simulation. No.
Okay, I see. No, it was a fun theoretical question.
No, there was a few practical barriers right from the very beginning with certain ideas.
Awesome. I think it's time to go to the third track of the week, because I'm specifically interested in this one, because this one kind of stands out for me. The track we're talking about is Battle of the Bros. Battle of the Bros. Well, my feeling here is a funk fusion jazz to my ear. Well, I'm no expert, but that's what it sounded to me. It got some influences that pulls me towards the Caribbean for some reason. I'm thinking Cuba for some specific reason. But the track, it gets me smiling. So let's tango. Pete, let's go.
Nice. So this is one of the early representations of the rival band in the game. And David might correct me, but I think this is all non-playable stuff, right, on this particular piece of music.
This is a cutscene.
So this was one of the happy occasions where I could just write a song, and my restrictions were just, right, what instruments can I use, rather than this guy can only play phrases that are 1/8 of a second long or whatever. So we could, yeah. So these were the moments when it was like writing a soundtrack. So it was about, we were working to references what we wanted things to sound like, and we had instruments in mind because they were non-playable characters, but there were characters that were important to the story. Played various different instruments, and then it was just about the rival band needed to sound intimidatingly competent. They needed to sound like better musicians than our playable band, because they were the kind of fire at their feet at this stage, and the antagonist that kept the plot moving and kept the later stages of gameplay and character development moving. So these guys were meant to sound kind of cool and slick and professional, and kind of frightening to the protagonist band.
So David, when is this track played? Like, if we have some sort of kind of a percentile, like, is it 60% into the game or earlier, or?
Yeah, this is around level 15 out of 20 for the stories. So that's, I guess, like 3/4 the way through if you count it that way. Yeah.
Okay. Because when I'm thinking about this, like, yeah, finally I can do like a full track and only think about the limitations on this. So Pete, from the perspective of a composer here, how was it possible for you? Because music is usually subjective, and this time you're the one setting, like, oh, this is the lower bar and this is the more intimidating part from
sure.
the bad guys, the antagonists.
I think there's an aspect of writing involved in that. So it's okay. These musicians are capable of more, so we don't have to keep things simple. But also we don't want to, there's an element of development in here as well. So we didn't want to come out full firepower. So we spoke quite a lot about the kind of level of the type of feeling that this should create and the level of intensity. We wanted to leave space to go in terms of tempo and intensity, which increases with both bands as the game goes on. Everything becomes fierier, and generally speaking, everything becomes faster as the game goes on, higher tempos. But we wanted to write a piece of music that kind of created a feeling of confidence, I suppose, confidence and competence. And again, as you said, they're playing Afro-Cuban music. They're not just playing funk music. So we had some different instrumentation, slightly different sounding bass, a percussion section instead of drums, trumpet player, not a saxophone player, and a guitarist. So we had the possibility of creating some different textures there and some whole other feelings. And of course, because they were not playable characters, we had the freedom to just bring some musicians in and let them play as they would like to play. So there was an aspect in these of production as well, like more traditional music production, as opposed to just me saying to Martin, yeah, that was great, man, but can you just play that last note a little bit shorter?
Yeah.
Which was what I spent a lot of the rest of the game doing. Me and Martin sitting in front of the screen saying, yeah, we nearly had that. Let's go again, but just play that one just very slightly shorter, please, before lunch, okay? Let's just do a few more of these. Let's get to the end of this level and let's just get these notes finishing in the right, which is an insane way to make music. Whereas with these guys, we could just say, okay, here's the song. Let's try and find some nice sounds. And,
so this track
play
was more
whatever
of a
you
jam
like.
session then, or?
It was pretty thoroughly written beforehand,
Okay.
and then we had some solos. We had really good musicians coming in who were able to, improvise or play extremely precisely what I'd written out. So we had the luxury of being able to swing both ways slightly in that regard.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I really love and adore when it comes to rhythmical games is usually the amount of people that kind of goes into this. There's not a lot of people and players that understands this. They usually think that, they're using like a library or it's just like one-man type of army. But like you said, now you're the saxophone player, but you have all these other instruments. Some of these were libraries and some of these were other artists and composers that you took in.
Well, this particular track is zero library. So we've got Erik Tengholm playing the trumpet and Affe Karlsson playing the guitar, Axel Fagerberg playing the percussion, and I think probably either Martin or Samuel Löfdahl playing the bass on this track. So it's all real human beings playing music, and the computer was used to record them, but for nothing else. Yeah.
But in total, when we're talking about the full album here, or the full original soundtrack for this game, how many artists did you work with in order to fully encapsulate the sound?
Say, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4 that I just mentioned there. Martin on bass, David on keys, me. So that's 5, 6, 7. Samuel Löfdahl, 8. I think 8 different musicians, probably. I want to say. I don't think I've forgotten anybody there.
Let's hope.
Yeah. So let's say eight different people, which should, on a low budget game with limited studio space was quite a thing actually. But we had a lot of time.
Time is money as well, as many people know.
No, that's true. We got an awful lot of work done in some quite short sessions. I mean, Martin, who played all Watts' bass parts, was the guy who, aside from me, had to really put the hours in. But, for example, like all the trumpets and guitars and things, I think we managed to really bang out in either...
half a day?
Yeah, it's probably single sessions. Yeah. Just short single sessions just over at my house.
Yeah. So basically, when you basically got... a musician to come and play, you basically had everything already set up for them, so they can just go in, do their thing, make smaller adjustments, and then they were done. Sounds correct?
This was the idea, is that we should try and do everything as quickly as possible. And obviously some things were naturally, particularly with the gameplay characters, things were naturally time consuming. Particularly with the bass. But yeah, no, I tried to, and I think part of what I may have been able to bring to this is that I've been fortunate enough to record myself and other musicians a lot over the last 25 years.
Okay.
So
you had a lot of experience through that as well then.
Yeah, I know what like a slow poorly prepared recording session is like, and I know what a efficient, well prepared recording session is like.
Yeah.
And I tried to prepare these sessions as well as I possibly could, so that the musicians could just do the things that they are good at doing, rather than sit there and say, oh, sorry, can we wait a minute? And, you know, I spent a lot of time sitting, observing very, very, very fast and efficient recording engineers over the years. And so I tried to be the fastest, most efficient recording engineer that I could be, so that there was minimal waiting for me to do file names and kind of set up tracks and all that kind of thing, and more playing in the sessions. So we tried to keep the sessions as playing focused as possible.
Yeah, I see. I was thinking, because when it comes to game development, there's always things going on. It is hard. It's not easy making games. So considering the hardship that kind of goes into making games, there's always bound to something unfortunate to happen. From tech perspective, David, was there any specific things you were really struggling with when you made this game that you have on top of your head that you know was really like hard to work around?
I never liked the standard kind of things like, oh, on this particular platform it's not strong enough and performance is an issue, or the loading is slow, or those kind of things. But tech-wise, we really didn't have that many problems with this title. I mean, knock on wood, but you know, my CTO Magnus might come and clock me over the head later for saying things. But
what the hell did
he
you
might
say?
have had some of his own problems that he kept to himself.
It's a credit to his setup that I feel like from a tech perspective it worked rather smoothly. Most of the challenges that we had, I think, were game design ones, or because the kind of stuff that we're doing is so unorthodox, and how to do the messaging to the user to help them understand what's going on and how to enjoy the most they can out of the game.
Yeah. Pete.
I mean, to speak about Magnus for a second, it's incredible, I think, working with somebody who you say, is this possible? And he says, well, I don't know. And then we'll go away, and then the following day come in having written something in private that meant that it was possible. And I don't think that there was anything that we presented him with that he wasn't able to quickly solve with a solution that he had developed himself. You know, and so there were some quite amazing things that were overcome. And I think it's really interesting and inspiring to be able to work with people like that who don't... It's very easy to say that difficult things aren't possible in a large project, because things can absolutely seem impossible, and sometimes things are, and you have to find a different solution. But it was nice to be in a team full of people where I don't think I heard anybody say, oh no, absolutely not, let's not try and do that, that's going to be a waste of time. You know, it may have slowed us down at certain points, but I think we always took the time to attempt to solve the problem. And I don't think to the same token, I don't think I ever heard anybody say that anything was a bad idea. I think any ideas that people came forward with were afforded the respect to game them out, see if they were possible, see if they would be useful, see if they would cut down on time. And I think, you know, I worked most closely, obviously, with David and Magnus, and I think all three of us were very constantly coming with ideas to try and solve problems, and we're quite a good team in that regard. And I don't think anybody felt remotely nervous about suggesting anything. I think is what I'm trying to get at. There was no feeling that any idea that anybody might come with would be considered wrong or stupid or impractical or anything like that. It felt very cooperative and a good environment of mutual respect.
Oh, I see. No, as I said, it is really interesting surrounding these facts, and as development goes on, sometimes you might need to kill your darlings surrounding certain things. And I know that from my own perspective, it's like having these grand like idea of something, and then you're just like, oh no, we can't do that, we can't do this. I mean, we need to ship the game at some point.
Yeah.
So from tech perspective,
No.
David here, surrounding this game, like from Produce Way, did you have to kill your darlings as well surrounding this, or did you have a good frame already from the beginning that you knew it was like, hey, we'll get this and it will be done in this amount of time?
I think in terms of like, we need these things, is we hit all of the stuff that we needed to have. We kind of felt like at sometimes like, oh, it would be cool if there was more audio pedals or more audio effects or something like that. I feel like there's an unlockable piano I wanted to have, and I think like we have lots of real-time audio effects the player can enable and choose to have on like Octaver and tape delay and things like that inside of the game. That are nice little ways for the user to customize the music, and some of those are like, yeah, the cost performance is X number of people are going to get to this feature if they unlock it. If they're a master player, it'll take this much more time. And, so a couple of those tiny little things, I guess, like ended up on the cutting room floor. Gameplay wise, when we were designing it, we're like, yeah, we want to have like these abilities and these kind of things, and then we build the game, we're like, damn, this is complicated enough as it is. We don't need all these extra powers. Like originally we're like, oh, we should have like multiple superpowers that you can do like loadouts on the character, and then we're like, no, this game is hard enough with only like a single superpower. No, let's not have any more superpowers. And like, okay, yeah. So, and that wasn't like I felt bad about that. We were just realizing like that's a good move. We don't need any more complexity in the game design. Yeah,
I don't think. Yeah, the complexity definitely was not one of the outcome problems in the game. Right? It's hard.
It is. No, but awesome on that part. I think it's time for the last track of the week for this one.
Great.
You guys ready for this one?
yes.
Awesome. We're going to listen to Art School Darlings. There we have it, folks, the last track of the week. This was the Art School Darlings from the game Backbeat, just to have that reiterated if people have forgotten what we're talking about. So, this is a track of funk. The bass pops up way more, but together with an early cowbell, I think I hear here. I'm a little bit unsure. But it gives off the real...
There's a whole bunch of percussion there.
There's a whole bunch of percussion, yeah. But it gives off that kind of, in quotes, rabbit ears here, the art school kind of vibe. And what I mean by that is it's basically... we just use what we can in to just get that music vibe. It twists and goes in full crescendo with a Caribbean style again in the last 30 seconds. So I really liked this track. It really stood out for me when I was listening to it because it felt so improvised. So I would like to know a little bit more about what was the thought about this track when you made it.
So the reference I received for this one originally was like a big concert ending. And as you say, like, big Afro-Cuban stuff. So this is the same... non-playable guys who we were talking about on the last track. So we had this freedom of being able to make a really soundtracky moment that was more to do with guiding the story than integrating with gameplay. And again, this is one of these moments where we're very lucky to have access to the musicians we did. So we've got Erik Tengholm, one of Sweden's really great trumpet players, Axel Fagerberg, one of the great percussionists, Alf Karlsson on guitar. I think it's probably Martin playing the bass again, who was just here and did almost everything on the game. This is just everybody really. We talked about earlier, leaving a little space for things to become more intense, and this is one of the points where it becomes more intense, and everybody's just playing to a real pitch, and everything is kind of really happening, and it's a high point within the kind of non-playable end of the soundtrack. Yeah, and I tried to get everybody to play that way, tried to get everything exciting and big, and kind of also from a technical perspective tried to mix the track to make it sound very live and concert-like and kind of wild and improvised, as opposed to the more tightly controlled music you may hear earlier in the game. Yeah, so we're just trying to create an impression of abandon at this stage, and of kind of real people playing to play to the best of their abilities.
But in this track as well, from what I understood now, this is also played together with the antagonist of the game as well, this rival band. But considering what we hear in this, I'm guessing it's not just that band that we're hearing that was more prominent, I would guess, with the Battle of the Bros. So is this also kind of a crescendo for the band, the power slides that you're playing within this game, that they are actually more complex now, comparing to what we heard with the Backwards J song?
No, actually...
David has to remind me of where we're at in the story here.
Actually, this is the near the end of the game, and they're at the Battle of the Bands, where the hero's power slide are about to go on. But they're standing in the wings and listening to La Tormenta, who are the villains or the antagonists of the game, and they're just finishing their set. So, like Pete said, it has to be very live, it has to be very polished, and it's very flamboyant because as like, I won't say conservative, but as traditional as funk as Power Slide is. You know, they're a new band, and they're just trying to get their footing. And La Tormenta has been around. They've got followers. That's where the Battle of the Bros went to, is their fans. Their super fans got into a fight in the shopping mall with Power Slide's newly found fans. A fight breaks out. So it's like this kind of antagonism that works on different levels in terms of they're technically better than they are. They've come from a prep school where you have to pay to get in and to study art and music and things like that. Where these guys are from the local public high school. So it's like that kind of money and upbringing versus coming from the sticks and cutting your teeth kind of thing. And that adversarial thing reaches a fever pitch here. So this is 100% pure Afro-Cuban music, like Pete said, and that's La Tormenta at their best, and everyone's seeing where that's going.
I see. No, it's interesting. It is fun to hear. As I haven't played the full game, as I said previously in the episode. It's so much nicer to get this kind of vibe, especially through the music as well, because these are just my initial findings of just listening to this and comparing to the information I'm getting live as we're talking about this as well. So it's really fun for me to kind of explore the game in this type of way as well. But one thing I've been really thinking about during this episode is the name of the heroes band here, the Power Slides. Right. Power Slide is just a typical term we usually tend to hear from time to time, but it's more known within rock and roll. So how come you chose the Power Slides, like you're power sliding on your knees in this sense? I don't know how well versed it is in funk, to be honest, so I would love to hear.
I mean, the story where they talk about how the name is decided, I think, is actually in the demo too. And the actual choosing of the name is kind of played out in the story as well, where the band is all kind of arguing and not arguing, but having a discussion about what they should be called, and everyone has a different opinion. And it's the same thing where we were sitting in the office, like, just one afternoon, and it was like the artists and the programmers and me were all sitting in the same area. And we're like, what about this? What about this? And they're like, and everybody has their opinions and like hates everybody else's ideas, basically.
So the story is based on game development.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's lots of mirrors there about like the roles in the company versus the roles in the band and what we serve and things like that. But Sly here is SLY, so it's like Sly and the Family Stone, you know, so it's a bit of a like in genre reference to like funk things going on there. And then it's also kind of like there's a joke in the thing about how the little brother, I think, is playing Mario Kart or something at the time, and he's like power sliding, and they get that sucked in their head. And yeah, so it was kind of like everybody like nobody like hated that one, nobody like loved it and thought it was the best, but everyone accepted that like, okay, we'll compromise there.
Because it was Mario Kart. No.
I think there's kind of an inbuilt joke to me as well about the fact that every band name is kind of terrible until you live with it for a while. I've just come off a tour and we were talking about it and the band I was with was saying, oh yeah, you know, it's like you just have to live with our name really now. You can't really change it. And every band I've ever worked with over the last sort of 25 years has said the same thing. And you know, when you look at the names of famous bands, they're terrible. The Beatles. But it's funny because the word beat is in there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, it's really a weak joke that these guys have had to, the living Beatles have had to live with for like 60 years. Yeah. And, you know, they're stuck with it, man. And like Oasis are stuck with their name. And, you know, all these guys, Rush.
Yeah.
Are stuck with their name, and you know, all these bands are stuck with one decision that they were forced to make, and probably didn't enjoy making very much, and just settled for the least unbearable option.
It is exciting.
And I think that's kind of fun.
But it is fun when you're pointing it out that way, and especially as David said, you had a discussion in the studio about that name, and of course everybody is gonna vote in the end. It's like basically everybody can just put the name in the hat, and we'll just pull one almost in that sense.
Yeah. What doesn't suck?
Yeah, because when you're making a game, it will only become as popular as you make them within the game. But of course then players can kind of like that game as well and start listening to the OST, but the OST is still just a game.
Oh, for sure. And I think, you know, with this the script is really funny in this game. I think David did a great job on kind of filling the script with little jokes about games and being in a band and being a young person and all these things, and they are, you know, there's without giving anything away about it, there is a theme of as in many games, but particularly in this, there's a theme of being an underdog and a theme of not quite feeling like quite enough compared to the other people you encounter, you know. And even in this early demo, Watts encounters sort of various musicians who all seem to have their stuff together and seem to have things going on in their lives. And this group that she ends up with are people that are all a little lost and in search of something, and may find and may not, you know, and just are slightly lost souls who find one another. And that's a big aspect here, you know. And it's supposed to be a little dorky in that way, I think.
Okay.
And I always think that's amusing, because then you think about the what do you call it, the contradiction between, you have Chaz in the game, who's like a complete self-centered dick, and he's so arrogant and full of himself, and that's like the complete polar opposite of Pete, who's like who is technically amazing, but one of the most humble and like nicest guys in the world. So it's just funny, like seeing like this. The music may be the same person, but that's where the similarities end. So
yeah.
Right, yeah. And actually, like, you know, and to call back to the thing that we spoke about earlier on, reminding the very, very, very capable musicians that we brought in to record the gameplay that this is supposed to be very basic. So play it in a basic way, but don't make any mistakes anyway. you know, and playing a role. But something I learned kind of early on in school orchestra or whatever, when you're messing around, the really fantastic musicians are the ones who are able to kind of fake not sounding very good far better than the people that are not very good. That just kind of in a way that a good actor is able to portray things in a way that someone who isn't an actor at all can't even begin to, and I think that has helped us out slightly in this game, having an able cast of people that are able to represent lots of different feelings and emotions and stages and parts of this story that are necessary to represent through music, which is what we've been trying to do.
Yeah. Now, with that, I think it is time to close up what the game Backbeat is. So, David, where can they find this amazing game that we've been listening and talking about? And what platforms?
You can find Backbeat on virtually every console and personal gaming system you can think of. PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox, all of them, Switch, PC, Linux, and also Mac with Steam. If you want to take a trip down memory lane, you can visit backbeatgame.com and check out our website, which emulates the internet as of 1995 and all its GeoCities animated GIF glory. So you could even listen to the final countdown playing on a MIDI simulator in there and everything. So.
I just love when I saw that webpage, and I know a lot of other people I've sent the game to for the demo. They found this page as well.
So all the people that were born in like kind of 2008 are just like, what's this?
Yeah, exactly. These people have no artistic sense whatsoever. This is the ugliest webpage known to man.
It's not a good webpage at all.
And everybody older than that's like, this
what
is
are those numbers at the bottom?
Yeah, why is this like mouse trail coming with a guitar everywhere?
Oh, the mouse trails, yeah. Oh, I love it.
Like the customizable MySpace vibe about things.
No, but as David said, GeoCities. I mean, I had one page back in the day myself.
Yeah. Did you?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Amazing. I remember them well. Just I remember the double-edged sword of the visit counter being kind of, well, you've got to have a visit counter on there, 'cause that's cool.
That was the best.
But
you see it rise.
It's a bit low. My visit counter is a bit low. What am I going to do about that? Just keep pressing refresh.
Exactly. But Pete, also from your point of perspective here, what was the thing with this soundtrack that you feel like really shone or shines for you?
I think, from my perspective, let me just collect some thoughts. The thing of having, I hope, created something that nobody's done before is a really important guiding principle through this, and it's why it's been hard, and it's why it's been difficult, why it was a huge challenge, and why we had to create a lot of solutions, because this wasn't a case of coming in and writing a soundtrack. This was a case of coming in and working out how to make a game together, all coming from doing different jobs within that framework, but saying, okay, imagine if there was a game like this, how would we do that? And asking ourselves that with each stage of the creative process, saying, right, okay, well, the game's going to be like this, so how are we going to do that? And there not being a specific rule book that could help us with that question, so having to arrive at solutions ourselves. And sometimes it was really obvious, and it would be like, okay, I know exactly how we're going to do this. And sometimes we had to make several failed versions of a problem in order to understand what the problem actually was, and kind of arrive together at a solution of how we might overcome that problem. And to me, that if there's anything particularly special about this game, it's that I hope we've created something that nobody has ever either attempted before, maybe, or achieved before. Perhaps in creating a kind of generative music game. that's like this one, which I've not seen anything like it before, and that's a cool thing.
Awesome. And David, do you have anything specific you're proud of there?
Yeah. I echo exactly what Pete says, because that's kind of our mission. And we're not trying to build games just because they've done before, but something that's never been done before, that pushes the boundaries of what it is to be in control of the music, even if you're not a musician, especially despite the fact you might not be a musician. And that's something we want to have in all of our games, and I think we've succeeded in that, and hopefully inspired people to learn more about funk and playing music and performing music and trying out, being in a band. But I'm especially proud always of the great people that I get to work with every time. I don't know if I'm lucky or just that there's lots of wonderful people in the world, but from the artists, we have so many talented artists who had just come out of school or were looking to cut their teeth on their first game. A lot of junior people, career-wise, that did an amazing job punching above their weight in terms of the graphics and the story writing team and the musicians, just everything. And then it came together that I think brings a lot of value and polish that is very hard to achieve. And I respect everyone who's worked on this, because they've all been absolute professional and extremely talented, and I'm blessed to work with all these people.
That's awesome. So, considering the next step onward, do you have any information about what to come? If this is something you can share, we can start with David.
Yeah, there is something coming, but I'm not at liberty to talk about it. There's actually two things that are coming, but I'm sorry I can't talk about them today. But if you are if you are a fan, please stay tuned and follow us on the social media channels, and please follow along and reach out, because we'd love to share the upcoming things with you.
And of course, as per usual with these episodes, all the information on where you can find, David and the studio Ichigoichie, all this information will be available in the main post of videospelsklubben.se. So people will easily be able to find this information and follow you through there. So Pete, in your end, do you have anything you can convey on what to come?
Oh man, I'm not working on any games at the moment. Nope. David and I have spoken about the things that we're not going to speak about. And I expect we'll continue to speak about them and continue to kind of work through solving more problems.
Yep.
But otherwise, I'm just working for other people, playing the saxophone, writing TV commercials and soundtracks, and just doing my job in whatever way people come to me with it.
Mm-hmm. Is there any way people can get in contact with you on social media, for example?
Yeah, Instagram, Blue Sky. Now we're not using Twitter anymore. Yeah, wherever they can find me, they are extremely welcome to contact me. I'm just Pete Fraser Music on everything.
And David, do you have any specific account or social media you want to promote on your own side, or should we just promote the Ichigoichie social media?
I mean, I still have a Twitter account, but I haven't been using it too much, and I haven't gotten around to doing anything with my Blue Sky account yet. But you can find me at Game Deventura, is the handle name that I have on those two channels.
Awesome. Yes, is there anything else that you felt like, hey, Chris, you missed out on this? You definitely forgot to ask this. Is there anything else? David?
No, I don't think you forgot to ask anything. I had a fantastic time talking with you, and also hearing from Pete, because Pete said some stuff that, even though we worked together on quite a lot, like hearing him explain some things in a way I hadn't heard it explained before was incredibly interesting to me. So thank you for the experience.
Well, no, likewise. Yep. And we haven't seen each other in a few weeks, so nice to chat.
Yeah, that's true.
No, I think it was a really good and great, unique opportunity for me to actually be able to talk to both of you. I usually tend to just invite the composers for this to talk about the music and so on. So this is like a one-in-a-lifetime situations where I'm able to talk to both the developer and the composer for a game that we're diving deeper into. So I really thank you so much for joining in here, David and Pete, for this episode of Gameable Audio.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. So, with that said, it's time for me to go to do the last things of the episode. And, well, if you're interested in finding more episodes of Gameable Audio, you'll find those on our homepage, videospelsklubben.se. You'll find us also on Spotify or in your closest podcast app. Feel free to follow and comment on one of our social medias, either Facebook or Instagram. Just search for Gameable Audio and you'll find us there. You can also support this podcast for future content, but also quality upgrades. But in the end, when I don't need more money for paying for music or for server costs, well, everything else is going to be working as a fund for future composers. So think about becoming a Patreon backer. One of our current awesome Patreon backers that we have today is Daniel Onemark, Lars Schenström, Titti Schenström, Kevin Wikström, Mike Björkholm, and Sandris Wikström. Thank you all for being such an amazing part in supporting this podcast. And of course, links where you can either buy and support Ichigoichie and their games will be found in the main post of our videospelsklubben.se. The podcast theme music was composed by the amazing Thor Myrdal, as always. And the next thing that we're going to talk about is the New Year special. David and Pete, do you have any game from this year or a game you played maybe this year that you thought was absolutely amazing when it comes to music or gameplay? We can have Pete starting this time.
I only play games with my kids on the Nintendo Switch. And my kids have played the hell out of a game we bought for like $3 called Pikuniku. I don't know if you've come across Pikuniku.
Pikuniku. I for some reason, I kind of remember the name, but I can't really point out what the hell the game is.
This game has not got old to my kids, even one bit. So they've played through the story mode like at least 5 times, and then there's a multiplayer thing that they play with their friends, and they just kind of... There are objectives, but they're very happy just exploring the world in it as well. And the music is really fun and fantastic, like unashamedly kind of like chiptune-y homemade music and everything. And yeah, the whole thing is like bright and colourful and really fun. And if you have kids, it's great. And if you don't have kids, it's fun to play as well. Like really funny script. Yeah, and we've had a super good time with it.
Ah, nice. David, your end?
Yeah, I've been playing tons of games this year, actually, because I'm in that phase of my development cycle where I'm studying stuff for the next big thing. So I
market
don't know
research.
Yeah, exactly. But not to tip anything about what I'm doing next, because it's really not something I would make myself. But I want to call out a great indie game called Signalis that was out on several platforms, and it's like this beautiful love letter to like the survival horror games of the PS2, early PS2 era, and it's kind of like pixelated, but it also has like this dark drabness, and it's like this deep space love story with like flashbacks and androids, and the atmosphere is fantastic. I devoured that game, and they did a fantastic job.
But I feel like I feel like I've heard this name before. But is this the game when you played like an astronomer or something like that?
No, you're like a cybernetic creature, or like in space, like recovering your memories and trying to find your previous crew on a deserted planet.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, but it sounds nice. Usually when it comes to thriller or scary kind of vibe in games, the music is usually very exceptional, because setting that kind of thriller, scary vibe requires a lot of music cues, in my opinion. And I've done some research on these topics as well, so I feel like I'm confident to say.
It's fascinating, that, man, suspense building. Like, I can still have, as I said, I'm not like a big game player, but I still have like really strong memories of playing Doom on my home PC as a young teenager, and just the like minimal, suspenseful sound design and soundtrack is just terrifying if you're playing with headphones in the dark. Like, I would still be terrified now.
Yeah, I'm still scared when it comes to scared.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy. It really tores
It's simple
tores
stuff,
me
man,
apart.
but it's psychological, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh,
Definitely.
interesting.
No, but yet again, thank you so much for joining in on this episode of Gameable Audio. This was episode 25, talking to David and Pete on their work on Backbeat. And as David said, you will be able to find this on each and every console virtually. So definitely check it out. David, is the demo also available for consoles, for example, or is this just
Yes,
a
the
Steam
demo is
thing?
the demo is everywhere as well.
Okay, so everybody can literally just play test this if they don't want to spend money up front. Then.
Definitely. And we just did a big update, I think, actually 2 weeks ago, where we did some quality of life improvements and also usability things. So if you tried the game once and thought you kind of got it, but not super, I ask you to try it again, because we've added like videos and improved the UI in some places and things like that to help everybody have a great time with it.
Awesome. Sounds great. But with that said, I want to wish every listener out there a really nice and neat week and weekend coming up, most likely. And look forward to the next episode of Gameable Audio. With that said, I want to thank everybody for listening in and see you all guys next time.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Cheers.